Hello, welcome back. You are watching Raw News, and we have a winner. Um, if you've been following our coverage for the last few days, you know we've been following the US election very closely, but there's not been a result until today. While yesterday we had projected Joe Biden was going to win, today we can confirm with the support of CNN, Fox News, ABC, NBC, MSNBC, the BBC, and several Canadian broadcasters. I want to bring in my lead analyst, Dylan McKee. Dylan, hello. Welcome to live stream.
Hello.
Welcome to this very rushed live stream. Joe Biden has won. Joe Biden is the 46th president of the USA. Dylan, tell us how it happened.
So I'll take you back to early Wednesday morning, the first of many sleepless nights. And at 12:05, we had our first results. Kentucky was called for Mr. Trump with 8 electoral college votes, and Vermont was called for Mr. Biden with 3 electoral college votes. And this was the start of a wild ride. So we'll skip through the states that we expected to go either Democrat or Republican. We had places like Indiana go to Trump, along with Arkansas, whereas we saw Connecticut, Delaware, Illinois, and places like that go to Biden. But the most important, or the first swing state to go, was at, let me just get the date for the time. It was 5:15 a.m. and Minnesota was called for Joe Biden. But at this point in the night, there were some fearful faces in the Democrat camp. We had Florida, and Florida was looking increasingly likely to go to Trump. This wasn't what the polls were saying, and was a key state that Trump needed to keep him in the race. Without Florida, Trump's chances of winning were less than 1 in 10. But as soon as he took Florida, he had a 1 in 3 chance of winning the presidency. And it was worrying. It got worrying for the Democrats as Trump went on to take Iowa and Montana. So states were going Trump's way, and the momentum was very much with Donald Trump as we headed towards our Raw News morning live stream. So that sort of takes us to where we started on Wednesday morning on very little hours of sleep. And this is where it got interesting. We were looking at 3 key states: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So as soon as Wisconsin and Michigan went to Biden, it was clear this race was very close. There was different paths to victory, all favoring Joe Biden, with Nevada, Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania being key to victory. Trump was not out of the race at this point, and hence having us all on tenterhooks since Wednesday morning. It looks like the initial votes counted from Election Day all favored Trump heavily. And we've seen in places like Pennsylvania, the mail-in ballots from large urban areas like Philadelphia have come in very strong blue. And we've seen this slow shift into the blue in states like Nevada and Pennsylvania, which means today we were luckily finally put out of our misery and given a result where we saw Joe Biden take 290 electoral college votes, pushing him over the 270 he needs to win the electoral college. So if we just have a quick look at the numbers, in Georgia, there is very little difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, and this is one of the states that is yet to be called. So it's 49.5% to 49.3% with Joe Biden leading at the moment, and votes still being counted. But the one that took us over the line, if I just scroll to find it, it is Pennsylvania. So Pennsylvania is worth 20 electoral college votes and was the key defining factor in this race. It was the tipping point where Joe Biden eventually took 3,345,906 votes to Donald Trump's 3,311,448. Very tight margins, 49.7% of the vote there going to Joe Biden and 49.2% to Donald Trump. And that is where the race stands today. Some broadcasters have not yet called Arizona. They believe it is too close to call, but the Associated Press and the Decision Desk have both given it to Joe Biden. So that is where the 290 comes from, with Trump currently on 214. But the race is still open, with those last electoral college votes being available in Georgia and North Carolina.
Dylan, as our chief expert, where do you think North Carolina and Georgia are going to go?
So Georgia at the moment, it looks very likely to go to Joe Biden, but this is a question mark still, as it's 49.5% of the vote to Joe Biden at the moment, and with Donald Trump sitting on 49.3%, but only 99% of the votes have been counted, higher numbers than we saw on Wednesday, of course, with just a few left to go, but these will be from overseas military bases, which typically tend to trend heavily Republican, and is what we would have seen in a normal election with mail-in ballots trending Republican, but this isn't the case this time. So it's yet to be seen whether those final few ballots will push Trump over the line or Biden will secure an even greater victory than at present. And then to move to North Carolina, the voting has been unbelievably slow in North Carolina, and I'm surprised it has not yet been called. There's a bigger margin of victory for Trump there, as he sits on 50.1% to Biden's 48.7%. So North Carolina, we typically expect to be a red state, and while it's yet to be called, those 15 electoral college votes are almost certainly going to Donald Trump.
Yeah, I want to ask you something. Now, obviously, the polling in this election, we saw polls put Biden nothing like 9 points ahead. That's clearly not happened. What went wrong?
So I don't think it's as drastic as the 2016 polling error, and you have to be careful that most polls carry a margin of error of around 3% either way. And if we look at the national polling, and you said there that Biden was leading by 9 points, at the moment, the popular vote currently gives him about a 5% lead, or a 5-point lead over Donald Trump. So that's just beyond the margin of error. But obviously, the night did not go as expected, with places like Florida, Ohio, and places like that going to Donald Trump. It wasn't the clean sweep that we thought we'd see, although it does look to be a decisive victory for Joe Biden. Where this leaves us with faith in pollsters, I mean, I don't think it could have gotten worse following 2016, but they definitely haven't restored our faith in them this time round.
Yeah. Well, let's leave the presidency aside for a moment. Sorry, will you?
No, you go on.
Okay. Let's leave the presidency aside for a moment. Let's talk about the Senate and the House. Now, Democrats believed they were going to capture the Senate and retain the House. While they have retained the House, the Senate seems, if not confirmed, out of their hands, slightly beyond reach. Can you talk about that for a few seconds?
Yes, of course. So the Senate race was expected to go to the Democrats. We were looking at a need for 3 net seats gain for the Democrats for them to gain a majority in the upper chamber of the House. So this didn't happen. This is not how it unfolded. They did lose that seat as expected in Alabama, where a special election had put a Democrat in place. That seat was lost. There was some hope early on with, I think, Montana turning, or I think there was a state early on that did show initial signs of hope for the Democrats, but this slowly tapered away over the night with Montana going Republican and Maine. They didn't overturn those key seats, but this is where it gets interesting. So at present, including the independents with the Democratic side of the Senate, we're currently stood at 48-48. So the Senate as it stands is equal. This is, or I think it might be, we're waiting for 2 results in Georgia, and there are 2 runoff elections, it looks like. So in Georgia, you need to win by over 50% of the popular vote to be declared their senator. It's a special election this time around, with both seats being elected. And looking at how close Georgia is, these 2 races are going to be key. So we're not going to know the final balance of the Senate until January, with these 2 runoff elections taking place, and that is what will decide the makeup of the Senate.
Dylan, sorry to interrupt you there at the end. BBC is now projecting that President-elect Joe Biden has won the state of Nevada, a state that has spent many days in a very odd way of counting its votes. Dylan, so a lot of people, now we see lots of conspiracy theories pop up around how long it's been taking all these votes to be counted. why should we? How would you reassure people to trust the process?
So this is a democratic election, and the democratic norms have been observed. So if I just have a look back on my timeline here, it was when Trump won Florida at 5:38 a.m. He then went on live TV at 5:47. Oh, sorry. Yeah, 5:49. He tweeted that he was the winner. He declared himself the victor. This was completely incorrect. And as we saw from the coverage, particularly CNN, and I know The Guardian also put out some lines with some interesting political corrections from Twitter as well. This was a sort of scenario that these broadcasters were prepared for, and that was Donald Trump falsely claiming victory with no basis and a seemingly simultaneous mandate to, or wish to, stop counting in states that he was ahead and continue counting in states that he was behind. This was just poor politics from Trump and a lack of respect for the democratic process. Luckily, we've seen many figures on a state level reinforce the need for every legal ballot to be counted. And as far as we're aware, that is what is happening. Because in elections, obviously from overseas military bases, those ballots can take a lot longer to get to the states and the places of counting. So you are allowed, as long as your ballot has been submitted by election day, it doesn't matter when it gets to the polling station within a certain amount of weeks, as long as it is there, submitted on election day, that vote counts. That is a legal ballot, and it needs to be counted for us to get the correct result in any election.
Yeah. Now, tonight I want to ask you about Arizona, Georgia, two very, very red states. The last time they voted Democrat was under Bill Clinton in the 90s. How did Joe Biden turn it around?
Well, this is really interesting. And I think the main thing to say about the sort of scale of this election is the huge turnout difference. So even if Donald Trump is well, we now know that Donald Trump is the loser. He has 5 million more votes than he had in 2016. So it's truly fascinating, the breakdown of this election, because it's a voter turnout that we have not seen for quite some time. So Joe Biden's key policies, did they appeal to these people in Arizona and Nevada, I think was the others, or Georgia, sorry. So we knew that going into the night, Joe Biden had to overturn seats. It's very interesting that it's come from these red seats, and it looks as though the voting population in these states that has overturned it into a blue state has been the growth of Democrat voters in urban areas. So particularly in places like Phoenix in Arizona, there's lots of blue counties surrounding Phoenix. And then if we look at Georgia, Atlanta was what tipped Biden over the edge there and pushed him into the lead. So obviously we know that Democratic policies and the Democratic Party in general appeals to those urban voters near cities. But it looks like that message has finally got through to Republican voters or swing voters in Republican states.
Dylan, I know you can only address for a few minutes, so I guess I'll ask one last question. Well, do you think Joe Biden can do it? Do you think he can get to 460 electoral votes?
Sorry, what's the question?
Can Joe Biden get to 306 electoral votes as he sort of seems to currently be in position to do?
I think he will eventually end up with a decisive victory. So we're looking now. I know you said that the Electoral College, I think you said Arizona had been called. So I do think that he can win Georgia, and that will obviously leave him with the 306 electoral votes that you described as a decisive victory for the Democratic Party.
Well, Dylan, it's an absolute pleasure having you on the show tonight. I'm ordering you now, go get some rest, because I know you've been up as long as I have following this election. So go to bed right now. All right. It's a pleasure having you, Dylan.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. All right, now I want to bring in some people who are similarly sleep deprived, the presenters of our shows on Tuesday and Wednesday, Cam Hall, Johnny Jenkins, and Luke James. Gentlemen, I want to start by asking, how are you?
Recovering. Yeah, I've managed to get my sleep schedule back, so it's great. Yeah.
Luke?
It's been a long week, I think, is the best way to summarize. I had a US foreign policy seminar the day after the election. It was somewhat of an ordeal.
And Johnny?
I'm just glad we got a result. Even when I go to bed, I'm just my head is whirring round, and I've got sort of John King going like this in my head. I just need a bit of rest. But it's such a big moment, and I'm so glad we've been able to get a result, and what a historic one as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, Johnny, you were supposed to host a results show, which we didn't have to host without a result. And then yesterday you did project a result. Obviously, now you're seeing it real life in the flesh. How do you feel? Joe Biden is president.
I'm genuinely shocked. Not because of the events of the last few days, it's all been leading up to this. But in the weeks, months, dare I say years before this election, I was so convinced that Donald Trump would be able to win once again. And I didn't think Joe Biden was a strong enough candidate to be able to win the White House. I think that with a lot of Trump supporters and this idea of sort of shy Trump voting, actually that he was going to come up trumps on the day. And it seemed like that the morning after, as you say, on our sort of results show or whatever you want to call it. And it's now been building up over the past few days to this election of Joe Biden. We've got a messy few months ahead. Donald Trump isn't going to concede. He's going to be dragged out of the White House, Diet Coke and Big Mac in hands, and by Melania, come on, Donald, it's time to go. He's not going to want to leave. It's such a big moment, this. And Joe Biden, the man who was vice president for 8 years under President Obama, not too long ago, who really has led quite a minimal campaign, not going to big rallies, doing drive-in events, really to emphasize his message about coronavirus, has been able to do it. And also, of course, and I'm sure we'll get onto this, his vice president makes so much history. So it's a very, very big moment. And I'm pleased to see democracy in action and to see all the votes counted and to see that, of course, the American people have decided.
Yeah. I mean, Johnny, you saw something out there. Joe Biden, after a 50-year-long political career, is now finally president of the United States of America. Luke, I want to come to you because you also hosted the results show without any results. I remember, I think someone texted me after your show saying, Enoch, we burnt through about an hour's worth of content, half an hour. What do we do next? And you still managed to save it somehow. Luke, how do you feel? Joe Biden is now president.
I mean, as I said, it's been a really long week, and I think for quite a while this has felt inevitable. And there was a sense on social media the last couple of days that news agencies should have called this race earlier, which has been interesting because that isn't normally the case. Normally the result is clear, the result gets called, and that's kind of the end of it. I think the interesting thing that happens next is to see how President Trump responds and what kind of the final months of his presidency looks like at this point. Because, the world tour of Donald Trump was on a golf course a couple of hours ago. So what happens next kind of remains up in the air. But rumors coming out of the Trump camp is that the mood has been pretty dire for a couple of days now. And the transition will become so important at this point because Joe Biden, and Barack Obama said this in his tweet, has a monumental task on hand in terms of the economy, in terms of climate change, and of course, with regards to the coronavirus too. And that's a huge challenge for Joe Biden, especially if it's a bumpy transition as it appears that it could be. And I think the other interesting thing to bear in mind about the weeks and months ahead is that you're potentially going to have, you are going to have runoff Senate elections in Georgia, potentially North Carolina, and maybe even in Maine too. And it will be so fascinating to see how the GOP respond to this, because they can either hitch their campaigns, their second run at the campaign, to Donald Trump, or they can go in a different direction. And it will be interesting to see whether this result marks the end of Trump or it's something that the Republicans continue to go down.
Yeah, and we'll discuss all those issues, obviously, the end of Trump, Joe Biden's position in a bit. But firstly, I want to come to Cam Hall, who probably should have been the most well-rested of all our hosts, because he hosted the first 2 hours of the show, then she went to bed. But still managed to stay up for the entire time. Like, I've been sending updates since all the Raw News election group chat, and Cam Hall's been posting at like 2 o'clock in the morning, like, you're blowing my mind, Enoch. So I want to know, Cam, how do you feel? Joe Biden's finally president. Go.
Well, the thing is, the last couple of days, so for Wednesday, I was very up in the air because obviously we saw Trump do well in Florida. We saw him do well in Ohio. And we saw him leading by quite margins in most of these states. And we knew the mail-in ballots were coming in. But I think it was still very up in the air. I didn't really know on Wednesday who I would say was going to win. But I think by the time I woke up on Thursday morning and we started to see Biden taking the lead in some of these states, I think that was the time where I was like, yeah, I think Joe Biden's got this now. And I think we've kind of, both Johnny and Luke have kind of touched on, obviously, the ramifications of all of this, really. Joe Biden is now president. There's a lot of questions, obviously, on Trump's transition as well. I think one of the most important things, I think, now is to ensure there's a peaceful as transition as possible, to ensure that you can go from the Trump administration to the Biden administration. You've got everyone in place by January 20th, and that people know what they're doing. Of course, with Donald Trump, he's still very much pushing that voter fraud position. And it's going to be very interesting to see, because we know yesterday Samuel Alito made a judgment on the counts, I believe, in Georgia, which was to say that you have to separate mail-in ballots from on-the-day ballots, but you're still counting them. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see. And the mood, certainly from the Trump campaign the past couple of days, as Johnny said, particularly with regards to these legal cases, it doesn't seem to be going their way at the moment. But Donald Trump is very clear he's going to push this to the Supreme Court. And it's not like in 2000 where we were waiting on the results of Florida. And so Al Gore and George Bush could very much not concede the election because they knew it was that one state and the margins were extremely tight. But there's multiple states here. And as Dylan was saying earlier, Joe Biden can still pick up electoral college votes. And so it may get to the stage that before these legal challenges come in, that Biden's already past 270 beyond doubt of the legal challenges. So that's going to be interesting to watch. I don't, as much as people say this is over, I don't think we've heard the last of this just yet.
And on that ominous thought from Cam, let's say that from a different perspective, I want to bring in a long-term Trump fan, Rin Datcheva, to talk about the conflict today.
Wow, thanks for that introduction. I've had such a rough few days seeing him lose all these votes. That's why I'm so happy right now.
Rin, your boy's taking one hell of a beating. I mean, what's going on? How do you feel?
Horrible. I'm on the verge of tears. Okay, I just want to make it clear I'm not a Trump supporter. I can't even pretend. I'm sorry. Oh no, it's been like, you guys, you've been covering this live. I do not know how you made it. I've not presented anything, and I've still barely slept in the last 4 or 5 days. And as Johnny, as you said, I just keep hearing CNN's analysis over and over and over again.
And every day you wake up and you think, oh my God, is Joe Biden going to be? Is he the president? What's happened? And it's like, and then you see
that Nevada's not counted any more votes.
Also, Rin, I just want you to know, I am going to clip the bit where where I go, you're a Trump fan, and then you go, yeah, and that's going to be always used from this show as like for advertising purposes. I just want you to know.
Great, thank you. It's probably not the worst thing that I've said on student radio that you can take out of context. So, you know.
Oh, and we've had a comment in from X1 Jacob. There's no shame in being a Trump reporter. I guess it's spreading. I guess the news is out there.
Yeah. Stop the count. I don't know. Wait, do we think that is Donald Trump continuing to, demand stopping the count, starting the count?
I want to be clear. I'm the host of this show. I ask the questions. Yeah. So, team, do you think? It's my one job, but you're taking it from me.
I don't know. That's why I'm asking.
Well, I mean, I think. Do we think now that the network's officially called the election for Trump, the Secret Service has moved in, they set up their new no-fly zone? Do you think Donald Trump's going to say, I'm going to keep fighting this, or do we think he's going to give in? Rinaka, I guess I'll come to you first.
He's going to fight to the bitter end. He will have
actually, sorry, Rin. I've had some news. Trump has left the golf course en route to the White House now.
He's going to barricade in there. Huh?
I think he may be about to make a statement to preempt Joe Biden's victory speech this evening.
He's obviously been working hard on all those legal cases all day.
Yeah.
And really trying to fight the battle.
Well, Actually, we have a clip here from the Rudy Giuliani's press conference. Oh no, we don't. Oh, do we have? Actually, we do. If you give me a few seconds, we're going to have a clip from Rudy Giuliani's press conference earlier.
Once you find it, can I show you something?
Yes.
I want to show you a picture. These are the predecessors of Kamala Harris. Can you see this array of white men? What a moment.
Yeah.
It really is.
I guess you know what. I have something I want to ask you. When as I'm supposed to have to be tokenist. As a woman, how does it feel that for the first time in history, a woman is now sitting on not just on the White House ticket, but as one is in the White House as vice president?
It's really shocking because I remember the 2016 election. Everyone expected Hillary to win, and then she didn't. But definitely Kamala Harris, she's broken through the glass ceiling, and it's a great thing to see. And I think it's even more incredible that she's not only a woman, but she's a woman of color as well. She's the first non-white vice president, and it's really, I think she's such an important role model, I think, now for other women who can look up to her and see that you can get there. And I think that's really the most important thing about it, because clearly she's a capable politician to get that far, although in American politics that could not always be true, but she is. So yeah, it's really great to see.
Yeah, and before I play this clip of Rudy Giuliani, I want to ask the panel, what do you think Kamala's role is going to be in Joe Biden's White House? Cam, I'll start with you.
So to quote President Frank Underwood from House of Cards, the vice president has two roles. They are either the matador or the doormat. And I think the most prominent example of the matador of recent years certainly is, of course, Dick Cheney and his influence over foreign policy under George Bush Jr.'s presidency. In terms of sort of doormats, in terms of vice presidents, you always look to Mike Pence, really, who very much kind of followed Trump's lead at all accounts. So that's kind of the two examples you've got. I think one of the things with Kamala Harris is that she is very sort of forthright. She does have her opinions, and she is someone who I think will put them forward. I think she's someone who would like to take a role in the White House, but I think circumstantially as well. I think Joe Biden's 78, and even now he's just won the presidency, there's a lot of talk that he may not go for a second term, which you don't normally get with any other president just because of his age. And of course, for many people in the Democrat Party, Joe Biden was just the stopgap. He was what was necessary to defeat Donald Trump. He wasn't the long-term vision. And I think Kamala Harris was always seen as someone who could be more the long-term future of the Democrat Party. So I think that Kamala Harris is going to be the matador in the administration. I do think she is someone who I think can really bring a lot to the table. I think particularly with the debate on racial injustice at the moment and policing in the US, of course, Kamala Harris does have a checkered record from her time as Attorney General and District Attorney in San Francisco. It's not popular with everyone, but she does have a lot of experience there. So I think she will definitely be someone who will be leading on that. I can see her as well perhaps taking a role on matters such as climate change, for example. I think that's something where she could really bring a lot to the table. And I think that the Democrat Party are maybe seeing her as the successor to Joe Biden, someone who can very much unite the progressive left and the centrists within the party as well. So I think she's going to play a very key role in the administration. And if Joe Biden doesn't go for a second term in 2024, perhaps she will be at the top of the ticket, and that will be absolutely fascinating to see.
Well, it should be mentioned, for elections in the 21st century, Democrats don't tend to do so well when you have a black person on the ticket. So maybe that should influence their thinking going forward. We had a comment in from Nick Alfred who says, "I'm enjoying this much more spitting image, although that's not saying very much." Well, if BritBox would give us a bunch of money to make this to run the show, please, happy to be sponsored. Now, before we continue on about Kamala Harris, I do want to sort of play this clip from Rudy Giuliani for his press conference today outside the Four Seasons Landscaping Center on Donald Trump's legal chances.
Who was it called by? Oh my goodness, all the networks. Wow. All the networks. We have to forget about the law. Judges don't count. All the networks thought Biden was going to win by 10%. Gee, what happened?
Well, that was star of Borat, Rudy Giuliani, discussing his opinion on networks calling the election for Joe Biden rather than Donald Trump. Now, I will get back to. I do want to talk about this very quickly. Donald Trump's legal strategy in regards to how he's going to take away the vote, stop all the illegal votes being counted, as he said, the illegal votes, as he said it a few nights ago. It doesn't appear to be working. Do we think Donald Trump has a leg to stand on, legally speaking? Actually, I want to bring in my special legal correspondent for this. So Joshua Gray, welcome to the stream. Joshua, do you think Donald Trump's legal strategy is working?
This is the problem I have. His legal strategy, obviously, he wants to challenge Pennsylvania, most particularly. I don't know what's going to happen. This is the thing. Obviously, I'm still with the elation of being like, oh yeah, Biden's won. Okay, we can return to at least some form of normality within the White House. Oh, but is it going to work? I have this sneaking suspicion that it might work.
That's
I don't
your
know.
official opinion as our legal correspondent. Johnny, I can see you making a face immediately. Johnny, what do you think?
The networks don't decide who becomes the president. Rudy Giuliani doesn't decide who becomes the president. The president doesn't decide that. It's the American people who have voted for Joe Biden. These claims are baseless. It is so important for us to say this from a neutral perspective. And this isn't a partisan comment. The claims that Donald Trump and his team are making are completely baseless. Nobody, except his allies, have seen any evidence for this. It is not the case. Joe Biden will be the next president.
Yes. And it is always very important to remind people that, especially, recently we've seen it happen a lot more. Media figures more willing to tackle, especially now that he's lost, Donald Trump's sort of spreading of misinformation. Even places like the New York Post, which were famously very much in the tank with Donald Trump, came out the other day and described him as whining and making things up. Luke, I want to come to you. What do you think about does Trump even have a legal strategy?
I think not, if I'm being totally honest. And I think that's been clear the whole time, because Donald Trump's legal strategy from the beginning was to challenge these quote-unquote illegal ballots and talking about a major fraud and all this kind of stuff that the president has been speaking about. The issue that Donald Trump has in this regard is that a number of days have now passed since the election, and the president nor his lawyers have been able to tell us where this major fraud is. And again, Giuliani had his conference earlier. And I think an interesting point about Rudy Giuliani as well is that if we go back to the start of this century, he was seen as a well-respected mayor of New York. And now, 20 years on, the situation is very different. And I feel like the fact that Rudy Giuliani is the face of Donald Trump's legal claims at this point is very telling with regards to their kind of strength and whether or not they're going to go anywhere. Another thing I'd say about this as well is Pennsylvania, before the election, voted 4-4 on kind of a challenge to the idea that they could count ballots that were delivered kind of after election day. That says a lot too. If that was going to be overturned convincingly and with a fair degree of clarity, that would have already been done in the first place. And the issue that Donald Trump has, kind of my final comment on this, is that Joe Biden is winning, President-elect Joe Biden is winning by such a margin in Pennsylvania now as a result of the votes from Philadelphia, that even if these ballots were thrown out, it's very unlikely to make any difference with regards to the Electoral College vote anyway. So, in summation, I don't think he has a strategy, and if he does have a strategy, I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah. Well, we didn't have a legal strategy, but we have seen hints that there's plan to provoke some violence across America. I want to ask our QAnon correspondent Noah to join the stream now to discuss Donald Trump's courting of conspiracy theorists and violence and how that's all affecting things. Noah, welcome to the stream. Can you just for a second, for those who may not know, describe what QAnon is?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really sort of terrifying conspiracy theory that basically, I think it really came about after Donald Trump had been elected, that suggested that Donald Trump was the savior of America because Washington was full of Satan-worshipping Democratic paedophiles who are trying to bring America down. It was probably linked to sort of George Soros, lots of sort of anti-Semitic, baseless conspiracy theory with no evidence at all, and that Donald Trump was the only savior that would prevent that from happening. And so while conspiracy theories have always been around, it's under Donald Trump that they've really been allowed to sort of manifest and grow further. And you can partially link that to the sort of rise of the internet and the use of platforms like Twitter for spreading information or misinformation. As for conspiracy theories, they are, linked to the voting. That is still clearly there. People are saying that Donald Trump is still the president, and that while, they'll use the argument that while networks have called the election for Biden, that isn't actually grounded in reality. And so it'll be fascinating to see, depending on the margin by which Biden does win, whether it is a smaller amount or whether he gets those 306 electoral college votes that Dylan was talking about, whether people that were supportive of Trump are willing to, embrace losers' consent, which is a, tenet of democracy, whether they're willing to think, actually, Biden has won this fair and square in multiple states. Even if we managed to challenge Pennsylvania and get some kind of legal change, it wouldn't be enough to stop Biden winning, or whether this could, in the worst circumstance, lead to civil war. But it's clear from the last 4 years that conspiracy theories have really helped to drive the polarization that we've seen in this election.
In many ways, Donald Trump's been the last 4 years being conspiracy theorist in chief, and the fans that's won him, they don't seem very happy about the result. We saw earlier today in Pennsylvania, I think 4 armed men tried to deliver fake ballots to try and swing the vote back around Donald Trump's way. Do we think we're going to see more cases like this? Rin, I'll come to you. Unmute yourself first, Rin. That's always a good idea. Yeah.
Yay! You can see I'm very, very familiar with these, with technology in general, in fact. But I think they're gonna keep doing it. I think this is gonna continue on. Probably not for a very long time, but I think at least a few weeks we're gonna keep seeing protests, and hopefully not riots, but I feel like many people are gonna be really angry, and that's just gonna highlight how divided America still is.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I do want to come back to you though, because you are in effect our expert on these QAnon conspiracy theories.
Thank you for the promotion.
Something we've seen since election day is the famous Q, who was accusing the Democrats of being pedophiles, has gone quiet. Do we think that Donald Trump's loss spells the end of this conspiracy theory that's haunted American life for almost 4 years now?
Yeah, I think you're certainly not going to see the end of conspiracy theories there. As Ron was saying, people are going to challenge this again and again, and it sort of shows how the 2020 election has been so different from previous elections, because there was that belief from both sides, whatever their political differences, that the election was fair and square and could be trusted. And you saw that in 2000. It took a while. It took a month for George W. Bush to eventually triumph according to the Supreme Court. But Al Gore was willing to, while he didn't like the result, he did accept it. He conceded the result, and therefore that allowed that peaceful transition of power in early 2001. And you just haven't so far seen this from Donald Trump. I wonder what were to happen if Trump were willing to concede when he returns to the White House. I don't think he will, but if he was willing to concede, whether that would, mean that his supporters would accept the result and accept that if Trump says that he's lost, then he's lost, or whether those people will just keep believing that, many of his supporters, and not all of them, but many of them probably see, Trump as the second coming of Jesus Christ. I'm not joking. And so therefore they're not going to be put off by this election where Biden has resoundingly won the popular vote and more votes in state after state. And so what sort of is fascinating about this is that Trump will go next year, but it's what comes after him. Because while I believe this is a brilliant night for America and a brilliant night for liberal democracy, 70 million people still voted for Donald Trump. He got far more votes than he did in 2016 in every single social group apart from white males. If that's wrong, then that's wrong. He went up in terms of his the percentage that he won over. Now these people want someone to look to in 2024, and it could be that we end up with a Republican candidate that, in my mind, is even worse than Donald Trump, if that's possible.
I have to be impartial on that, so I can't comment. Now, speaking of Trump's not giving concession speech, we do have an expert here on people acting like divas. We have head of sport, Josh Wasim. Josh, do you think Donald Trump's going to concede?
The short answer is no, I don't think he will. I feel like he is. He's probably, I'm sure there'll be internal discussions with him and his advising team and seeing how they'll continue to do this. But as the legal battle kind of starts, I don't think he will. And I sort of feel like in any sort of speech, he'll sort of brush it off and pretend it's not really happened and sort of play it as if there's a big conspiracy against him and just play it off as if nothing's happened. Other than obviously him losing the White House, which is going to be very hard to ignore for many others who watch with glee.
And of course, I will not be joining them in the glee because I'm an impartial observer. I simply sit and process the news. But let's okay. Well, Trump. Whether or not Trump concedes, Joe Biden is now president. Let's talk about his transition. What do we think a Joe Biden White House is going to look like? Johnny, I'll come to you.
Well, it's important to know that the transition has begun. Meetings and discussions are already taking place. He is really, he's got, as you mentioned earlier, he's got the security detail around him. He is now, very, very close to being the president, and he will start acting like the president. When there is world events right now, we will hear a reaction from him. When anything happens, his reaction will be more important than the current president's reaction. So what will it look like? It's difficult. It's likely to be a slower pace. It's been, I think it's fair to say, a turbulent 4 years where a lot has taken place. It's been difficult to keep up with everything that's going on. There will be a change in pace. He's an older guy. What else is going to happen? More socially liberal policies, more diverse policies, more acceptance of anybody who is of a minority. We're going to see that not just from Joe Biden, the old white man, but from his vice president, Kamala Harris. She will really lead the way on that. In terms of economics, probably fewer tax cuts and tax help to those who are earning big, big money. But most importantly, number one issue in the whole world right now is coronavirus. He says, and we assume he's going to keep to his promise, free testing for all Americans. We take that for granted. That if in the morning I lose my sense of smell, I get a test the same day. No question about it. And in America, hopefully, Joe Biden will be able to roll that out. Thousands, hundreds of thousands of people dying in America. And most importantly, he's going to listen to the advisors. Fauci's not going to be fired. Well, maybe unless Donald Trump does it before January. That he's going to be listened to. And that is so important because coronavirus remains a top issue. And it's easy to forget about it when all of this is going on, but it's number one because it's life and death.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of those advisors, perhaps with cabinet as well, we have Cam Hall with some cabinet picks.
Yeah, so I've been following this actually over the last few days because obviously one of the things that a lot of the speculation with Trump was who's going to be in the administration to restrain him almost. So that was how many people were painting it. Of course, many of the original picks that he appointed, the likes of Rex Tillerson, were out within a year. I think the most important thing to say about this administration is it really depends on who controls the Senate, because the Senate are going to be responsible for approving Trump's cabinet, President Biden-elect Biden's cabinet picks. And of course, it's important to say that if it's a Democrat-controlled Senate, Joe Biden will have some more free choice over some of his appointments. There are rumors that Elizabeth Warren is his rumored pick to head up the Treasury Department. Now, that would be more possible under a Democrat Senate than a Republican Senate. You don't imagine Mitch McConnell approving of Elizabeth Warren in the Treasury Department. I think there's a lot of growing consensus, though, certainly from a lot of the rumors over the last few weeks, that Joe Biden's going to put a lot more centrist picks into his cabinet to try and almost act as a unifying force to appease both those on the left of his party who want to see more progressive radical change and feel that they didn't get their candidate, but we still want to get something in, but also maybe try and appeal to some of those more Republicans, potentially moderate Republicans, or even some Trump supporters who feel obviously that they still want to have some form of centrism or more conservative views in his cabinet. So some potential names coming up. So if not Elizabeth Warren for the Treasury Secretary, Lael Brainard, who was currently governor on the Federal Reserve. Also for Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, who was, I believe, the Deputy Secretary of State under Obama. He's said to be under consideration for that, as is Susan Rice, who was the former National Security Advisor to Joe Biden as well. It seems to be between those two at the moment. We've heard as well that Julian Castro could be offered a spot in Biden's cabinet. He served, I believe, it was housing and development under Obama. And also Sally Yates, who served as the Attorney General for a bit and Deputy Attorney General under Barack Obama. She is apparently been appointed to Biden's transition team. She will be the new Attorney General. And of course, we've seen over the last few years, and particularly with rumors that some of Donald Trump's figures in his administration could be under investigation, and there could be potential legal cases being pursued by the Department of Justice. And we saw how quite influential William Barr has been over the last few years as AG. That could be very interesting to see how that goes as well. Another name thrown up as well for Attorney General is Doug Jones, who was a former Alabama senator, beat Roy Moore in 2017. He lost his seat this time round. He's potentially named for the Justice Department. A lot of other things as well. Cedric Richmond, who was the former chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, actually someone I've met myself. I really do think highly of him. He is potentially going into the administration as well in some sort of position. So yeah, there's a lot of people. There's a lot of names. I'm just reading this article at the moment. There's plenty of names. Tammy Duckworth, who was a potential pick for VP. Keisha Lance Bottoms, who's the mayor of Atlanta. So I think it's very clear that Biden, I think, knows that he, obviously, if he has a GOP-controlled Senate, it's going to be a lot more difficult for him to get perhaps the likes of Elizabeth Warren or potentially even Bernie Sanders into his cabinet, those more progressive people on the left of the Democrat Party. But I do think Joe Biden, he's pledged unity has been a key theme of this election. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how, I think he's going to try and pursue unity, whether that is by bringing in people from the left, bringing in people from the political right as well, because of course we know Obama had some picks from the GOP, from the typical conservative right in his cabinet as well. So unity, I think, is going to be the key part of his administration. I think we'll get some more ideas over the next few weeks, but I think the key thing with any Biden administration officials is going to be who controls the Senate. And it's going to be a lot easier for him to get his picks passed if it's controlled by the Democrats than if it's controlled by the Republicans.
Yeah, and we'll get to the Georgia runoff in just a second. But first, under the guise of equal time, I do have to discuss the other presidential candidate from this election, Kanye West. And now we have our Kanye West correspondent here. Jess, welcome to the stream. Jess, what can you tell us about Kanye West's campaign this year? You have to unmute yourself as well, just so we can hear you. All right.
Can't hear you over all that Kanye music.
Yeah. Well, we'll come back to Jess in a second. If she's hopefully that's shy in a quick few. Well, let's talk about the Georgia Senate race then. So we thought Senator Perdue was going to keep his seat, and it's now going to a runoff, which will decide control of the Senate. Where do we think it's going to go? Josh, I think were you Georgia's state correspondent on the overnight live stream?
I wasn't, but I can be if you want me to.
You are now. Congratulations, you've been promoted. Well, what can you tell me about your Georgia's election?
Thank you. Look, it's going to be an interesting one because as it's going to be now a bit of a long wait till January, and as we know, Warnock, I think is the name of the Democrat candidate, is now up against so I think he's already made a fresh appeal for people to back his campaign. And look, he's going to be riding off this wave of obviously the Democrats winning Georgia in a presidential election is going to be a massive confidence boost, and I'm sure he's going to court the same sort of support. While the Republicans sort of need to I don't know. I guess they need to hope for a similar turnout to this one and hope that they can find even more votes, like how Trump found 1 million more people to vote from in Texas. So it's going to be an interesting wait towards January for sure.
Well, I mean, like you said earlier, Cam, this really does decide the fate of Biden's presidency. Either he wins Georgia, or he's going to be a pilot up who can't fly his plane.
Well, yeah, of course. And I think it's important to remember as well that I think before the night, the Democrats are very bullish about taking the Senate. And I think the minute where they couldn't take Maine, for example, and Susan Collins' very vulnerable seat there, that I think this really thrown the Senate back into play. I think in both of these races in Georgia, I mean, the Purdues are basically an institution in Georgia. Sonny Perdue was former governor. He was part of Trump's cabinet. David Perdue, of course, the senator there at the moment, I think very much seen as the favorite. And I think obviously his opponent, John Ossoff, is someone who I think has really proven a difficult challenge. I think that race is currently slightly leaning to David Perdue, but that will be very interesting one. And then the second race as well, again, that will be a really tough one to call because Raphael Warnock has really built up a lot of momentum over those last few months. But of course, there was the fight within the GOP as well between Kelly Loeffler and Doug Collins. And so, again, when that goes to that runoff, I mean, the thing is with both of these seats is that when it comes to that runoff, and I think with the Senate in play, because that will be the case, if it's the case where you're going into that either where it's 49-49, then potentially both of those seats could control the Senate. Of course, for the Republicans, it's important for them to have 51 seats because if it's 50-50, then Kamala Harris can break the tie as vice president. And so that gives the Democrats the majority. So I think if it's in that situation, with both of these races up, it's going to be essential for both parties to really get their supporters out. I think more so for the Republicans, because if they have a Democrat administration, they need to have a majority. And so there's a lot more to lose for them than the Democrats, who can happily lose one race, knowing that if it is 50-50, and provided they can keep their party in line, which is something become a lot more frequent with this polarization and partisanship in the US that we have today, there is a lot more to lose for the Republicans. And so I think it's going to be very interesting to see, firstly, from the Senate races we have left, but also what we get in Georgia as well.
Yeah, I think that's the course of the Democrat Party now is very interesting because there were reports this week of a Zoom call conducted in Democrat offices that did not go very well because it seems progressives and more conservative members of the Democrat Party clashed. Do we think the Democrats have enough unity to survive the next 4 years? Joshua Gray.
Yeah, this is something which certainly can be brought up to the discussion. We obviously, as you said, there is quite a split within the Democratic Party. If we go from the left, we have very liberal members towards the very right. I think they're called something like the Blue Dog Democrats, who are quite moderate Democrats. The thing is, though, I feel like most of the time that you obviously have like the center. Joe Biden represents a sort of moderate element within the Democratic Party, and then you have your conservative and liberal elements. The conservative element of the Democratic Party is very, very small in comparison to the liberal end. So Biden's main challenge here will be to unite those moderates and the liberals, which is going to be a tough challenge. But I think with Biden's experience in the past, especially as being a vice president himself, he's already known how to, especially under Obama's presidency, he knew how to sort of bridge the gap with the Republicans. I think he's more than capable of being able to keep the whole party in line.
Well, you brought up something very interesting there, Josh. If the Democrats don't take the Senate, Mitch McConnell will still be running the show in DC. Now, in the past, he and Joe Biden have seemed to be able to capable of making deals. But do we think Joe Biden has the same ability now he's president rather than just vice president? Luke, James, I'll come to you.
I think that's interesting, and I think it's good to look back to 2008 when Biden was obviously Obama's vice president. And I think the interesting thing there was Joe Biden at that stage was very much the linchpin between the Obama administration and what was going on Capitol Hill. And I feel like Kamala Harris is going to play a similar role in that because, of course, it's been 12 years now since Joe Biden left the Senate, and Kamala Harris is only just leaving. So I think that's an interesting dynamic. The Senate race is really interesting, and it's not gone as planned for the Democrats. I think they was expecting to sweep the board, and it's just not come through for them. The important thing to remember, though, with this is that there's 2 more years till the next set of elections, of course, after the runoff elections coming up in January. And by 2022, the landscape could be looking very different. And there's a couple of things that are important to remember. First of all, the seats that were up for grab this time around in this cycle tended to lean Republican anyway. There were some of the harder seats for the Democrats to take. The other thing to bear in mind is that the next set tend to be a little bit easier in terms of Democratic targets. So I think the first 2 years of the Joe Biden presidency will be trickier, of course, because at this stage it does look like Mitch McConnell is still going to be running the show in the Senate. However, 2 years down the line, the ground and the sands could start to be shifting in Washington, D.C. So I think there's probably some need for nuance in this, because Joe Biden has shown himself to be a pragmatic Democrat in the past, and I think we'll be seeing more of that once he does into the White House in January.
No, I want to come to you. In many of our conversations, you've said you're more of an outsider in US politics. You've not been as involved as you are. You're getting more involved now. What do you think of it now, looking at all these machinations in Washington? What do you think about this?
Well, I'm now obsessed with US politics. I mean, I deliberately this year took a US politics module where I could have done a UK module. I'm still obsessed with UK affairs, but US politics has now sort of really gripped my attention, just because it does seem so much sort of bigger, bolder, more influential, and almost scarier than what happens, in London or in Westminster. And so I think it's really fascinating, the points that people have made about what a Joe Biden presidency will be like. Assuming that all these legal challenges will fail, the oldest president going in, having been vice president, having been in the Senate for so many decades, what will he be like? And I can't easily answer that question, because I think even in the debate, so much of his candidacy has been defined about being anti-Trump, or being anti what Donald Trump represents. And that's all very well and good. I'm as anti-Trump as you can get, but it has to be about, pro-Biden, what he really stands for. Johnny was talking about coronavirus being such a serious issue. Now, it's brilliant that he wants to make sure that testing can take place, but I'm not really sure what his agenda is there to try and make sure that the number of new cases, he manages to deal with the problem as he needs to. The same for his domestic agenda. I'm not really sure what he wants to do there, and for foreign affairs, and he needs to answer that quickly. Otherwise, the American people will, in 2 years or 4 years' time. I think if there is any gridlock over the next 2 years because of the Senate refusing either to confirm, cabinet appointments, or refusing to endorse any of Joe Biden's agenda, I think that could work in his favor at the midterms. He could say, look, we've tried to put this policy forward and this policy forward, but Congress haven't been willing to approve, so give us the mandate that we need in the Senate. But I do think it was surprising that they didn't do better there. But I think we do need to see what Joe Biden himself stands for. People have said, obviously, Kamala Harris is sort of the one that will take the Democrats into the long-term future, but he needs to be leading for the forefront. As I said earlier, there are 70 million people that want a version of Trumpism, clearly, and otherwise, if Joe Biden is unable to convince them of why the Democrats are worth their vote, then they'll go to someone who might even be scarier than Trump himself.
Well, you mentioned foreign affairs there, and now I want to ask, we are all based in the UK, so let's ask about the big UK-focused question it's on everyone's minds. Brexit. Now, Brexit, Boris Johnson was very much relying on Donald Trump to give him a UK-US trade deal that was very favourable to him. It's now expected to get a much frostier reception from President Biden. Is the UK-US trade deal in jeopardy? Cam, I'll come to you, because I know you're a big Brexit fan, but I know you're very clued into all this kind of thing.
Oh, I wouldn't say a big Brexit fan, but certainly someone who I think can see both sides of the debate. I think it's important to say that one of the things that was fueling Boris Johnson, or the Boris Johnson-Donald Trump relationship, was the fact they were very close personally. And I think there's been this perception, obviously, Donald Trump was very pro-Brexit. It was seen to be very much a match made in heaven. Whereas for Joe Biden, it was very much the opposite. He's been very pro-EU throughout his time. He's been someone who is obviously a big supporter of free trade as well, and sees the EU as something that potentially the UK would have been better staying in. We know, of course, Barack Obama famously said in 2016 that if the UK left the EU, it would go to the back of the deal for a trade deal, back of the queue for that. So I think there has been this general perception that a Biden presidency would be the worst option for the UK. But I think it's also important to remember that Donald Trump, in terms of trade, is not this, rosy free trade deal that the UK promotes. And so much of the UK rhetoric has been, we want this massive free trade network. We want to be setting up these free trade agreements with nations around the world, and we very much want to be at the center of that. That's been the center of its negotiations with Japan, with Australia, with New Zealand. and been the sticking point of the EU in terms of obviously the competition and the state aid element of free trade. So with the US, Biden, on the face of it, it doesn't seem so bad because, yes, Biden and Boris Johnson may not be as close as Biden and Donald Trump, but you got to remember as well, Donald Trump liked his personal relationships, and that was how he did a lot of his foreign policy. Whereas Joe Biden, I think, will go back to a lot more of the traditional US foreign policy that is very much about, providing support to its Western allies. And that won't just be the EU. The UK-US special relationship is something that goes beyond, or goes beyond just a particular president. It's something that has persisted. It's something that both countries see as very beneficial. And particularly if Biden is more pro-free trade, that's something that fits the UK agenda a lot more. And I think the UK and US will have a lot of common grounds that we didn't see under the Trump administration. So climate change, for example, the US might sign the Paris Agreement. We know the UK want to join the Trans-Pacific Trade Partnership. If Biden goes back into that, and we know the UK has been working out with Japan how it can get into that, then perhaps that's an opportunity for free trade. But it's also important to say, a lot of people have talked about this US trade deal as being the pinnacle, especially if the UK can't get a deal with the EU. But it's important to remember as well that over half of the UK's trade is with the EU, and it will try to get some sort of deal, even if they agree at the very last minute. And the UK has a lot of other natural trading partners, for example, in the Commonwealth, that the US trade deal is not the be all and end all. There's already a lot of trade that happens anyway. And so if this free trade agreement that was going to come under Joe Biden under Donald Trump doesn't transpire under Joe Biden, it's slightly different. It's not as good. It's not the be all and end all of our trading relationship. And perhaps, as I've said, a Joe Biden presidency, a supporter of free trade, might fit in with what the UK says. So it's a very different type of foreign policy, but I wouldn't say whether it's objectively better or objectively worse than it would have been if Trump was re-elected.
Yeah, I want to talk more about Joe Biden's foreign policy in a second, but first, I've had this notice in from someone. In the fine print of Donald Trump's legal appeal, it says that 50% of donations may be used to pay off the debts of his campaign. So it seems, even to the end, Donald Trump is trying to use his supporters to pay off the mistakes of his failures. Yeah, so obviously you touched on there, Cam, on Joe Biden and his sort of. I want to ask firstly: is anyone else disagree with Cam? Does anyone think Cam's wrong there? That actually Joe Biden is a big problem for Britain? Josh, maybe. Josh, yeah.
Cam summed it up really well. I think on the surface, we've seen a lot of Biden's obviously come out and said the Good Friday Agreement has to be respected, and that the kind of will and what Northern Ireland's wishes are should be respected as well. But he's right. Cam's right in pointing out that there's a lot of overlap between the UK and the US, and certainly a lot of what Biden's been pushing for, whether it's been action on climate change, whether it's been action on a whole lot of other things as well. So I do feel like there's a lot more overlap than it seemed to be from the rhetoric a few weeks ago or months ago.
Yeah, Luke James, wants to jump in. Luke, what do you think?
I wouldn't say that Joe Biden presidency is a huge problem for the UK, but I think it changes a lot of things for Boris Johnson and his Conservative government. What I would say is, and we've already seen this, Boris Johnson, kind of the reports coming out from Downing Street, is apparently going to ramp up his efforts to talk to the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen about coming to an agreement. And I think that's so obvious what's happening, because throughout this year, 2020, the Democrats have been talking about how they will not accept the United Kingdom jeopardizing the Good Friday Agreement. And a no-deal Brexit, to the Americans at least, would be seen to do that. And I feel like the situation that the government finds themselves in now is they're between a rock and a hard place. Because if you follow through on this idea that you're going to go kind of a quote-unquote no-deal Brexit, Australian term, however we want to put it, you then, how do you get that trade with the United States? And I think we're going to see Boris Johnson in particular find a new kind of third way, for want of a better word, centre ground option on this Brexit thing, because otherwise you could end up in the worst of both worlds of being frozen out by the European Union and frozen out by the United States. And I don't think that would be the politically kind of sagacious thing to do. And that's why I do believe that this does change some of the dynamics, both between the UK and the EU, and also the UK and the United States.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to stop winding the stream down now because I'm aware that I did sort of rounding things up on you without holding it hostage for an hour. I just want to ask one last question. Donald Trump and Brexit have been linked from the very beginning as sort of a new phenomenon of right-wing populism booming across the world. Donald Trump now losing. Do we think this is the end? Do we think we're going to see a new age of centrism taking over? Johnny immediately shaking his head. We're going to go straight to you, and then we'll work our way around. Johnny, what do you think?
Trump is gone. Trumpism, alive and well, alive and kicking. Turnout was up in this election, which meant that Donald Trump got more votes this time than he did 4 years ago. There is a huge appetite for his style of politics. Like it or not, people think President Trump has good ideas and good actions, and many think he has been a good president. I would not rule out him standing again in 4 years' time as the Republican nominee. And he's not going to go away quietly. Sure, they can suspend his Twitter account if they like, but he's not going to go away quietly. He's still going to be a fixture of American politics because for the rest of his life, the word president will always be before his name.
Cam?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember with Brexit, with Donald Trump, that the reason that it took off was because it was very much a lot of people who had felt forgotten. And it wasn't necessarily as much the rhetoric as such as is one thing. And I think people can take their views on that. But the appeal that these politicians had, the appeal of their ideas was very much that we were forgotten. We were speaking out, that this person had come out and was starting to speak to us on issues, on quite controversial issues that people felt they were kind of being forgotten about. And I think it's important to remember as well, Johnny said it, that Trump is just the embodiment of, or he is a person who embodies a particular set of values that aren't going away. And Trump's been president for 4 years, but I think it's fair to say that there are still a lot of people that share a lot of the concerns and are still concerned about the things that Trump spoke about, whether that be, I think, immigration being a top issue, both in the Donald Trump and in the Brexit debate. I think the general issues with deindustrialization and people kind of feeling left behind economically. And I think to the same extent, that's why a lot of left-wing populism has arisen as well. So I agree with Johnny. I don't think that the policies, the values are going to go away. I think they're just going to be embodied in different people. Perhaps they won't be carried the same way as Donald Trump did it, because Donald Trump very much embodied it in a way that I think really did reach out and did appeal to people. Perhaps someone else will be able to do that. Perhaps they won't. But the values and, more importantly, the frustrations that motivated people to vote for Donald Trump, they haven't gone away.
Luke?
I agree. Trumpism is here to stay, and there's a couple of reasons for that. The Democrats have always been accused of kind of walking away from the white working class Americans, and we've seen a lot of the time Donald Trump is massively against globalization. It's why he's pulled out of things that involve global efforts against big issues, the Paris Climate Accord being kind of one of the key examples of this. And that frustration about globalization, about being left behind, about seeing these jobs go to Mexico, to the Far East, wherever they might be, that frustration is still going to remain. The only condition I'd put on whether or not Trumpism remains a political force in the United States is a lot of this has relied on Donald Trump's personal charisma. Whether or not you like him or not, the man has charisma. And what I would say is this: populism tends to live and die by the charisma of the leader. And you look at kind of what's happening in Brazil as an example of that as well. What I would say about Donald Trump is he was very, very successful, and he promised one thing when he entered politics. He said that he would represent people who previously felt unrepresented. And he said that he'd get those people to turn out and vote for him. And although he's lost this election, both in the Electoral College and the popular vote, he did get more people than ever to vote for him, a Republican candidate, and he got people who never voted before to vote for him. So the question for Trumpism is not whether or not it's a political ideology or message that works. The question is, can the replacement for Donald Trump bring the same results? Because if they're not able to connect in that same way, then yeah, as a political project, it's probably over in the mainstream. And then you see it start to move out to the fringes, which at that point could become an even more dangerous force.
Josh Sim.
Yeah, I mean, I echo everyone's sort of thoughts. I mean, this was a vote against Trump, and there's a clip from CNN's Van Jones going around at the moment saying this was a vote for a president of great character, as he described it. Who's not to say that someone of a slightly less controversial character and maybe have a slightly less controversial personal life comes out with the same policies as Trump and manages to appeal to people? I agree with Luke. Trump has charisma, and who's not to say that someone who comes after him, who carries similar policies and a similar charisma and doesn't have such a divisive personal life can succeed, because that person certainly can. So I don't think I like everyone has said before me, I don't think the ideology and stuff goes away. And it's really up to see, it's really up to how can Democrats now court the, I don't know, generalize them, but the rural voters. And as Andrew Yang put it really well yesterday, that's the big challenge for the next election, and we shall see if they're successful.
No?
Yeah, I think, thinking about the fact it's over 96 hours since we first went on air, this evening does bring an element of certainty and assurance. We know that Joe Biden will be the next president of the USA, but it is really important to remember that the challenge doesn't end there. Lots of people celebrating this evening, myself included, a celebration not because we're overwhelming fans of Joe Biden and the policies or lack thereof that he represents, but we're celebrating because this election does seem to have been a victory for democracy, liberty, civil rights, and respect in the constitutional process. And that can only take Joe Biden so far. And I think I don't desire a return to the old normal of centrism where, most people weren't seen as being interested in politics and they were left behind. And I think if Joe Biden does, inadvertently or deliberately try to go down that route as president, he will fail, and the candidate in 2024 will be really something quite nasty. I think the important thing to do is both, celebrate the millions of people that have voted for Biden, but also look at the 70 million plus people that have voted for Trump and understand, alongside, of course, a third of people that appear not to have voted in this election at all, and understand what drives them, why have they voted in this way, what are they feeling left behind about. We've had lots of talk this evening about how Joe Biden has always been seen as quite a pragmatic politician, and so he really needs to understand where his opponents are coming from and understand what's leading them to vote in a certain way and ensure that they can still be engaged in democracy. I think it's important to understand that the masses, the demos, can be engaged without having to resort to some nativist populism of the kind that Trump represents. Now, he might succeed, he might not, but if he just goes back to some sort of vacuous centrism, which to me has no ideology at all, that would be a return of politics of the past for the worse. And so I think a lot of it is about engagement and keeping the conversation going, even though the election has officially ended.
And last but never least, Joshua Gray.
Yeah, I think I'm going to echo a lot of opinions here, but it's populism is Brexit still going on. I think the election also shows that we are nowhere near out of the woods yet when it comes to populism and Trumpism. In fact, where I'm happy that Biden won. I didn't want to see Trump win this again, but this is still a failure for the Democrats, this result. The fact that Trump brought it to such a close margin, it was this close, it shouldn't have been this close, but yet it was. And this shows you that Trump's appeal, populist appeal, sort of Trump's idea of policies are now mainstream. They are now something which voters will come out into the ballot box and will vote for. This is something which is not going to go away for a good amount of time. And whether Trump runs again in 2024 is yet to be seen, but I guarantee you he'll definitely give it a shot and he will get votes.
Well, on that very gloomy note, I want to say thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. We will have more details on exactly what went down this election on Monday at 1 p.m. on Insight, the main departmental news show airing live on Raw 12:01 a.m. So please do tune in for that.
Enoch.
Yeah.
I just want to say, on behalf of all of the panel and all of the team, because there's a very big team behind our presidential election coverage. No, we want to see your face. Let's go back to this. Thank you so much. And I think I speak on behalf of everybody here. You've worked so hard. And Dylan, who was on the show earlier, you two have been behind all of this. And we just want to say thank you so much. You've done a really fantastic job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Round of applause. Standing ovation.
You can't hijack my show to be nice to me. That's not how it works here. I'm the nice one on my show. God. Oh, honestly, thank all of you guys so much for all the absolutely amazing effort you've put in over the last few days. And not just on the, just on the live streams, but also helping plan for the live stream, helping just in the group chat, keeping things going, keeping people engaged. You've all been absolutely wonderful. Thank to everyone at home for watching and tuning in. Also normally for Insight, but also for the special live streams we did, which now I think have over 1,500 views across all platforms. So thank you all so much for that. Please do tune in on Monday for 1 p.m. For Insight. We'll be going over this in more depth, as well as discussing all the latest stories about all the latest updates and every other story in the world, including, I'm hearing something about Putin. Apparently something about Putin's happening in the news. I'm not entirely clear what's going on there. But if you do tune in on Monday, we'll have some more details for you. But until then, I've been Ian Makungu. This has been Raw News, America Votes, and thank you so much for watching.